Councilmember Diane Law.
Here.
Councilmember Kevin Collins.
Here.
Councilmember Matt Castilla.
Here.
Councilmember Norma Greco. Councilmember Adam McDowell.
Here.
And Councilmember Valerie Renthaler.
Here.
That me?
Alex, we're not picking up Jay if we're supposed to.
You might want to switch your speaker. And what color? You can't hear him?
No,
Can you hear me?
we can hear Matt.
Now can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right. Thanks for the update. Not that anybody really wanted to hear me anyway. And Alex, if you can promote Jamie, she's here as well. So as I was saying, while muted, that I was just kind of welcoming everyone to the November workshop. We had gone through roll call. I had announced that I was present as well. So I think that's covered on the books, which brings us to, again, one of the most important reasons that we have this meeting as always, and that is our public comment. So again, I will go through. If you raise your hand, I will call you. Please state your name, your address. You have 3 minutes to speak. I am a little bit strict on that because we do have a lot, we do have a lot to get through, and then we will move forward. So if you have a comment, if you raise your hand, I will call on you. We will promote you and move forward. So I think we first have Alex was Kate Kerrigan Hill, if you've promoted her. So Kate, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Kate Kerrigan Hill. I live at 1441, and I want to be very complimentary of a police officer who came to my house today. I heard a loud crash this morning, and someone had driven off the road, off of Beulah Road, directly into my mailbox and sent it into my neighbor's driveway. Took the post out, the mailbox, and I assumed it was a car crash. However, I called 911. Just to make a report. It wasn't an emergency, obviously, but I will say that I believe his first name is Chris. His last name, I believe, is Spells. He came and he had already found the man apparently who had done this, and this man was not well and had driven off of Churchill Road. And I say all that to say that I was very impressed with Officer Spells. So please, if someone would pass that along to him, because he was very good. And he was concerned about the man's well-being, which I thought was great. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comment. And I will just say that we are consistently proud of our police force.
And it's probably Officer Shell.
So yeah, it is Officer Shell. So we know that, and we appreciate your comment about it. And I'm glad to know that our police force remains kind of high quality, and that you got the service, and that man got the help that he needed. Moving next to
Susan Sterrett.
Susan Sterrett, you've been promoted, so the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'd like to share my screen. My comment today is about the general topic of suburban research campuses, of which Churchill has one, but there are many. The Churchill site has a special place in local, national, and global history. I'm just going to talk about the national story today, and that's the story of the Suburban Research Laboratory. There's a bunch of them. Besides Westinghouse, there's Bell Labs in New Jersey, IBM, Stanford Research Park. These were kind of built around the same decade, and they're all facing the same issue. We are what to do, because it's a national trend that these are not being used in the same way anymore. So Bell Laboratories is already on the National Register of Historic Places. These are considered cultural resources, and George Westinghouse Research Park has been determined eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. So what? Two big things. First, in Pennsylvania, any developer must work with a state level process of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to evaluate alternatives for reusing existing buildings. And also there's funds to help with the reuse and historic preservation. We were told tens of millions of dollars for this. I want to show you what Bell Labs has done with their situation and opportunities. They've made this wonderful, wonderful restoration. Many different community activities. You can go to that site, it blows your mind. To play, work, learn, farmers market gatherings, and they have filming on the site. There's a lot of money available to use these sites for filming, and that's why we see that there. Same with IBM Research Campus, tech companies, brewery, bakery, gym, and now a studio there for filming. I noticed that our site, or Churchill site also, has restored a building and as a sound studio, and it's been used for filming, and some movies have been made there. And I believe it's also because there's a tax credit, which has been extended to 2025. So I just wanted to make the comment that is, as with Bell Labs Research Park, Churchill's Research Park is, though privately owned, it's still a cultural resource, and reusing the current buildings must be considered first. There's a recent policy for DEP. If Alex would like me to send it, I can. And I would like to make the personal comment that appropriate transformations can take time because they respond, appropriate ones, because they respond to community interests and funding opportunities as they arise. These have been shown to have very high value of all sorts to communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And Susan, for the record, if you can just state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to do that.
It's okay.
Susan G. Starrett at 1903 Hampstead Drive.
Thank you, Susan. Who's next on this?
Bonnie Shinaki is next.
I'm sorry?
Bonnie.
Bonnie
Shinaki.
Shidaki is up next.
Thank you. It's Bonnie Shinaki, 303 Churchill Road. The last name is Chojnacki. I delivered public comments with some slides on historic preservation. And at this point, I'd just like to screen share and show something else. Hang on a second. Are you seeing the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, wait a minute.
There you go.
This is just talking a little bit about the sustainability aspect of historic preservation. The Lindy Center at Caltech was the first historic laboratory building to be LEED certified. It was actually platinum certified. I'm curious about the Westinghouse buildings. I'm not sure how much was lab space and how much was office space, but this particular building was restored into academic buildings. It was a poster child for the sustainable adaptation of unique buildings, and it became the Center for Environmental Sciences. It's the first historic laboratory building to be platinum certified. Here's another picture of it. And some of the sustainable building, the renovation was the first to achieve LEED Platinum rating for a laboratory and a historic building, and the first building with radiant cooling and compressor-free cooling 50% of the year. First to achieve 60% reduction in lab equipment energy use, and the first to get 20% or more of its power from on-site photovoltaic panels. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. It kind of complements what Susan has said, and also adds the another piece to the sustainable development possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comment. Who's next, Alex?
Kathy Bordner, please.
Kathy Bordner. you are next if you would like to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me? Take that as a yes.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kathy Bordner and I live at 1926 Hampstead Drive. Today I contacted Jeremy Roberts with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Jeremy is the person with the Corps of Engineers who is doing the jurisdictional determination to determine whether or not the Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction over the site and would be issuing permits. We had a very good long conversation and Jeremy sent me an email summarizing that conversation, and it's much briefer than the conversation was. As for the approved jurisdictional determination for the Churchill site, the Corps has not yet completed the AJD due to a recent court case in Arizona. We no longer utilize what was known as the Navigable Waters Protection Rule as our way of defining jurisdiction. For this reason, we have reverted back to the pre-2015 regulatory regime for making these determinations. I have reached out to all of my applicants with current HAD requests and have asked them to provide me with their intent to proceed with their pending HADs under this pre-2015 regulatory regime. If their intent is for us to proceed with a preliminary jurisdictional determination, this essentially regulates all waters on a site if requested, or if they wish to withdraw their request without a JD, which is a judicial determination. I am waiting for most applicants to respond with their intent. So for now, I do not know if we will continue with an HAD for the Churchill site. If not, there will be no posting to our website. And then he gave me a link to their website. And Jeremy, I don't know if any of you recall, this has to do with the Section 106 review process, which Mr. Leif Metz did acknowledge during one of the meetings that they are aware that they have to follow. And if there is federal permitting or funding, they are required to go through this process. And if they were to start demolishing buildings or destroying historic assets on the site without completing that process, then they could be denied federal permits in the future. And so basically it is on hold. And also Jeremy did mention, although he didn't say it in this email, that they had heard from the DEP and that there is some type of issue regarding the inventory of waterways on the site that is going to muddy the water even more. So stay
Thank you,
tuned.
Kathy. Unfortunately, that is the 3 minutes. So I appreciate your time and your comment.
It wasn't 3 minutes.
I have a timer. I wouldn't short people their time. I promise you that. I make sure everybody gets exactly their time, so it's fair for everybody who's here. So moving forward, who's next on? There's no one else? Yeah, I apologize. I don't give people extra time and I don't short them their time. I literally go by a timer as soon as people talk. So I'm looking right at it. So I appreciate it. But that is it for public comment then, if there's no one else. That being the case, then we are going to move into, we have a special guest is the way that it is listed. Am I missing anything? Like, couldn't? No, I'd asked Gavin or Alex already. We're going to move to our special guest for the night, and that is that the school district, the Woodland Hills School District, has volunteered to have a conversation with us on a couple of obviously interesting topics that we wanted to speak to. So what I'd like to do first is let you know kind of who we have with us tonight, if I am correct. And we should have with us Jamie Glasser, along with Mike Petrogallo, Mike Belmont, and Superintendent Harris. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, I think, for the opportunity to speak. And then we can have a bit of a dialogue if you'd like, and then we can move from there. So Jamie, I turn it to you for a second, if that's all right.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all tonight. And as you said, we do have two topics of concern. broadly speaking. First, as many of you are aware, I attended the public hearing last week in the public comment section with the intent of giving some perspective from the district on the Amazon proposal. I was not permitted to speak at that time, and I am told that I will be permitted to speak tonight on that topic. So I wanted to confirm first that that is acceptable to the council.
Yeah, this is not the public hearing. This is our workshop meeting. And so under this format, you're more than welcome to speak on whatever comments you have. Those are your positions and your board's positions. We're here to have a dialogue with you on that and other issues, not simply that.
Well, and then again, thank you for the opportunity to come with you, to come to be with you all on that issue and to give our comments, although we are disappointed that they will not be on the formal record of the hearing. And I understand the reasons for that. I do think, however, given the district's cognizable interest in the issue, it would have been appropriate for us to speak, but that is neither here nor there at this stage. So having said that, I will make some of the comments that I intended to make last week. And then if there's additional questions on the board's position, I'd be happy to answer those. And I do want to reiterate the disclosures that I made at the beginning of my comments last week before I was cut off. And those are two. First, the first is that my brother is employed by Amazon at corporate. He took a position with that company in April of 2021. And he does not work in the area that makes these decisions or that works on projects of this kind. He and I have not spoken about this project in any depth, aside from the fact that it is, existing, potentially, in conversation around here, but no details other than that. But I do want to make that clear to everyone. I don't want anyone to be surprised by that. And second of all, the board has met in various configurations and never in excess of sunshine law rules with the developer and with Amazon proper, as well as with the Churchill Future Group. So we've been having conversations about this on all sides. So that being said, the board has, in those conversations, to the extent that we were able to do that, expressed concerns about this. We continue to be concerned about transit access to the site. We continue to be concerned about the ways in which this project could impact public transit in our entire corridor and in this portion of the county. I believe it could be an opportunity for us to build back some of the transit that has been lost over the years. We also believe that there are employment opportunities that are created here, but we want to make sure that those are coming to our towns and to the district that we represent. We recognize that there can't be guarantees around that, but at the same time, also want to make sure that there is outreach and that the opportunities that may exist are conveyed to our residents. We're also concerned about many of the issues that were discussed at length in the hearing, and I know you all listened to a lot of testimony about light and noise and traffic and sound and environmental impacts, and all of those are a concern for us as well. On balance, however, my board is unanimously supportive of this project. We believe it will be an investment in this area of the county that we've not seen for decades or longer. I've lived in Forest Hills my whole life, and the site that would house this facility has been underutilized for the vast majority of my life. For the past 10 years or so, we've seen the ramifications of the reality that the site is challenging to redevelop, in that there's been no significant productive use, and there have been irresponsible development efforts that are a concern for all of us. We also see potential for students, for partnerships, for opportunities that could be created if the proposal is moved ahead. We don't believe we can afford to lose those. We also have an obligation to address the fiscal realities of our district. The tax revenue that would come to the district is not insignificant were this project to move forward. Even based on the lowest projections, we would see a significant portion of our budget from, in terms of our revenue from that site. It would be a significant and meaningful portion of the budget, and it would impact positively the residents of the district, the students in our schools, and all of our communities, we believe. I want to also say that that the board has not been asked to consider an abatement in any formal way by either the developer, Hillwood, or by Amazon. There would be grave concerns among not only for myself, but for my colleagues, were we to be asked for an abatement by a company of this size. But because we have not, we stand to gain the revenue that would be generated by the project on the full value of the project and the site once it is reassessed. We recognize there'll be impacts from this project. We will all feel them, and some of us more than others. Speaking personally, my house is less than a mile from the site. I will certainly feel the impacts. I walk on the Greensburg Pike just about every day. So, you know, we're also residents of these towns. We're also your neighbors. And although none of us lives in Churchill at the moment, we do represent your community as well as the other 11 in the district. We believe this is an opportunity that we can't pass up. So we encourage you to support the project on the whole. That is not to say, again, that there aren't concerns. There are, and we encourage you to put in place strict measures to ensure that, you know, requirements and expectations are met by the developer and by the end user. So that's what I have to say on that. I'm happy to answer questions.
So we appreciate your comments in this capacity. I think there's not a lot of comments that we're going to have right now because we still are in a different space for that. And I don't want to mix the spaces. But I know you wanted to have the opportunity to kind of have a comment, and it's certainly okay to have that comment here. So I think that's kind of area one. But as you know, as we know, and as you know, and as everybody knows, it turns out we have more on our plate than just a development project, right? As it turns out, the borough keeps going. And, you know, one of those things, you know, certainly has been that issue, you know, what's happening kind of at the high school and kind of the safety and security space. So, and I think there will be some comments in discussion. I'd like to give the opportunity for you all to kind of give your take of what's going on. We're not there in the same way that we have been. And then I'd like to kind of allow for council to have a conversation with you all and maybe a dialogue to understand a little better.
Sure. And to that end, I'm joined by, as you mentioned, Mr. Harris and by Mr. Petrogallo. Mr. Harris is our superintendent. Mr. Petrogallo is our director of security and safety. And either of them can speak to the incidents that occurred at the high school. I should say that everyone is very concerned about the events of the last 2 Wednesdays. And I'll turn it over to those gentlemen to explain exactly what has happened and what our plan is going forward. So let me do this. Mr. Petrogallo, would you give a brief overview of what happened first on the 20th of October and then last week on the 27th?
Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. So 2 Wednesdays ago on October 20th, we had what started out as a fight, an altercation between 2 classmates in our first lunch period, roughly 10:30 Wednesday morning. And watching it on surveillance video after the fact, coincidentally, these 2 young ladies are actually friends. So it appeared that there was a conversation going on between one of the participants and a third party, a female student. And as this conversation went on, because the friend who became participant number 2 looked like she went to intercede and calm participant number 1 down, actually to a point that participant number 1 was seated at a cafeteria table, seated in her chair. Her friend literally sat on her lap, put her arm around her shoulder, and kind of was talking to her in a way to, you know, diffuse the situation. And there were no indicators from surveillance video, and bear in mind it has no sound, but, you know, full color video and high quality. So watching it, you really don't see a buildup, so to speak. And I think at one point what we surmised is the participant number 1 just wasn't calming down, and it looked like she said, okay, you know, get off. Okay, that's enough, get off. And the next thing you know, these 2 young ladies began to scuffle. not making a judgment, but it was a scuffle between two students. It was contained, it was broken up, they were separated, and they were both immediately escorted to administrative offices to accept the consequences. The principals took over at that point. They called the parents. Parents were on their way up to the school to get their children and take them home for suspension. The next lunch period rolls around, unrelated to the first incident completely. And in the best terms I can use, an individual approached another student and said, "Hey, I think you should know that your girlfriend is fooling around with that guy over there." And he points him out. At that point, who would be participant number one in the second lunch period, walks over and confronts the student who he was just told. So far, I mean, it's a high school thing, so to speak. So participant number one walks over, confronts this individual who's identified as having had something to do with participant number one's girlfriend. They exchange words. Participant number one throws the first punch. Turns out participant number two is a member of the football team, and his teammates are sitting at that table with him. His first punch is thrown. Participant number two's friends intervene. Participant number one's friends move, and a fight breaks out. At that time, every available security officer, at that time, there were 8 of our contract security personnel. They moved in, lunch monitors moved in, principals moved in. The fight was broken up, but a teacher in the cafeteria, a teacher in the cafeteria placed a 911 call and dispatched. When Churchill Borough responded, we had officers from Churchill, Officer Plines, Officer Sage, and then there were other officers from, joining boroughs, from Forest Hills, from Wilkins, Turtle Creek, I believe. So when we were notified, both Mr. Harris and myself responded to the high school. And at that point, every participant was being, the fight was being broken up. Participants were being taken down, escorted to actually any available space. Normally when there's an altercation, the protocol is to break up the fight, remove the participants, separate them, and move them to a principal's office, which there are 3. Well, in this case, participants were being moved to any available space in the administrative wing, in any of the auxiliary classrooms, between the cafeteria and the administrative spaces. So, again, as always, Chief, I see you're on the call here as well. We couldn't ask for more. When we reach out, you're always there. We appreciate your officers very much. And when I arrived, one of the things that impressed me the most was, when the police arrived, they had, they came into the building. They were in the front lobby area when I arrived, already having realized that I think the fighters had been separated and they were in different, classrooms awaiting their punishment. So I got to speak with the officers briefly, and then we went in to see, the next logical course of action, which was contacting family members, contacting parents, guardians, getting them up to the school to take their students back home. From that point, that would have been the 20th. Fast forward 1 week. Well, let me just back up a step. I want to make sure we cover everything. We had our school board meeting was scheduled for that evening. So we attended executive session prior. We discussed the events of the day, debriefed it, so to speak, what happened, what we did about it, where we see we can make some preemptive moves for future incidents. We had the school board meeting. During the board meeting, we received an anonymous tip from a software we use called Safe to Say Something. And it's a web-based site that anyone can go in. You can choose to be anonymous. You can choose to identify yourself. And it's a way to pass information to school personnel. And, the distribution list normally goes to principal of the high school first, the head principal first, Mr. Harris, myself, and Dawn Golden, our director of pupil personnel. So we're in the borough meeting, or rather, the school board meeting, and we get this Safe to Say, and it was from a third party saying, hey, it was told to me by my student that he overheard another student, doesn't know his name, threatening to bring a gun to school tomorrow. So, again, as the board meeting is underway, I see it. I know that the others, on the distribution list see it. And, threats like this, shame on you if you don't take it seriously. So that's what we did. In short order, there was a second, but really it wasn't a second threat. It was a second report of the same situation. So, again, a little bit more validity to it. So in those moments, in the closing comments, Mr. Harris said, okay, based on a threat that we just received, based on information just received, we have decided to go virtual for the next 2 days, which were Thursday, the 21st and Friday, the 23rd. So with that, we put Thursday and Friday to good use. I met with all of our security personnel, communicated with their corporate office, asking for additional personnel. And we rolled into the following week, which had been last week. So let me try to think about this for a second. This past Wednesday now would have been 1 week later, 1 week after the 20th, the 27th this was, at 6:21 a.m., we receive a safe to say notification that a student posted a video on a social media platform. I don't know if it was Instagram or Snapchat, but it was one of those two. And while the video is rolling, another student made a comment that I'm going to bring a Glock to school tomorrow and shoot the place up. So 6:21 a.m., we get the word. Mr. Harris, myself, Ms. Mans, high school principal, and Dawn Golden. So by 6:30, we put together a plan of action. I communicated with my deputy director, Sergeant Pedro Velez. He's been with us for quite some time. And he and I met at the high school with our lead security officer from our contract entity. The three of us decided, we knew who we were looking for by this time. The student had been identified by a parent, actually, who was aware of what was happening. So, we checked the information. We had the background on the student, really not much of an attendance record, really not while we took the threat seriously, I thought the value in identifying the student was to understand who we were looking for and know who we were looking for when we were standing curbside as the buses started to arrive. So as the buses rolled in, we were able to get eyes on. We watched, we watched the crowd, did not see the student, did not see either of the students, the individual who made the video or the one that commented, and made the threat. So word went out via robocall to the parents. And I couldn't give you an accurate time frame on that as I was in the midst of watching the crowd for the student. But the next thing that happened was a robocall went out to the parents. Shortly after that, notification went out to our teachers. And Chief, as you may recall, the one thing that I normally do in a situation like that, we'll absolutely make the call to 911 for proper notification. But as I have contact with a lot of the officers, as a courtesy, I like to give a quick heads up first, so they're not blindsided. So I called, at the time, I don't remember if my first call went out or a text to Officer Sage and Officer Plines. Hey, this is what's happening. We just had this by safe to say something, a threat came in. This is what we're doing. This is what happened. This is what we're doing about it. And then when I spoke with Officer Plines short while later, as I intended to do anyway, he reiterated, listen, still make the call to 911. So it's a matter of record. We'll be right over to help out. So they did. And that was the first time we saw them that day. So now in the midst of this, the word was put out. Parents were able to come to the school and pick up their students if they so desired. And that's a very controlled evolution. And it involves a little bit of traffic in the parking lot, but it's very controlled. Parents will come in, they'll identify themselves in the secured entry. They'll come into the office, the outer office, and then we'll make the call over the PA system to bring their students down, and then they're free to go. So as that was going on, maybe an hour or so had evolved. We went into a conference room in the administrative wing. The principals, myself, Mr. Harris, I believe Officer Velez was with us, from my team, and we're sitting in the conference room, debriefing what happened and, talking about what we could do proactively moving forward. And as I'm sitting here looking forward, all of a sudden, Officer Sage pops her head through the door. And I have to be honest with you, it was one of those moments where I thought there was like almost a time lapse where I thought, oh, I guess they didn't leave yet. Well, unbeknownst to us at the time, a 911 call went out from somewhere making a threat to shoot up the school. So Churchill responded and came back. So, again, that was a little bit of, it was a surprise to everybody, a surprise to everyone. So a short while later, as I recall, there were four total, the first one being mine for notification. The next two were anonymous 911 calls. Now, later in the afternoon, maybe an hour and a half before dismissal, another call went out. The third time they responded, it was, and again, Chief, to your officer's credit, Officer Plines and Officer Sage, every time, when they showed up, they're like, hey, we're here to help. Let's sort this out. Due diligence, we checked everything we could possibly check, assured everyone that there was no, we actually went in prior to that, when the parents were coming to take their students, we went into what we call a soft lockdown, where while you're in class, the doors are locked. The security officers were patrolling the hallways, making sure there were no stragglers walking the halls. If a student had to be in the hallway, it was with a hall pass for a valid reason, on their way to meet with a guidance counselor or on their way to a special class or something like that. And that was conducted by our Pal American security guards. So the third time, first call was mine, second call was anonymous, third call was anonymous. And by the fourth call, same two officers rolled in, only this time they came with Officer Hiller from Forest Hills. So when they got there, this got a little bit more interesting. This fourth and final call was made to county dispatch, the caller in a very muffled voice, unable to determine if it was male, female, how young, but made a muffled call saying, I'm hiding in Woodland Hills High School. There's a gunman in the building. I'm scared. So now the dispatcher tries to get more information and, talk to the caller. And at that point, the dispatcher gets to the point and says, and what is your name? And the kid giggles out a profanity, laughs, and hangs up. So at this point, I believe it was Officer Hiller who called a shift commander. Shift commander called Verizon. Verizon then triangulated the phone call, determined where it was coming from, and it was most likely coming from someone inside the building. And at that point, because of the magnitude of it and because of tying up, a false call to 911, what Verizon agreed to do was provide the owner of the number's name, address, and so forth. So at this point, the last, my understanding was Forest Hills was pursuing that themselves. So, it was unfortunate that it happened, no doubt about it. But, the one call that we would have considered the actual threat that started the whole thing off was through our reporting software, which, have to look at this in hindsight, forward, or any other time. A threat was made via social media, and that threat was reported through the software as it's intended to be used. That part of it worked well. Everything that happened after that was, as I said, and this is just what I'm about to say here is one man's opinion only, but it seemed to me that, it may very well have been someone who thought we ought to have canceled school. And when we didn't, thought maybe that helped the process out a little bit. And that, I believe, is what probably precipitated those other calls. And that brings us up to now.
So that gets us to kind of the current space. I don't know if people have questions about what happened before we kind of move, because there's a couple things I want to point out, and then I'd really like to hear, and I'll certainly anybody else, but I'd like to hear kind of what the plan moving forward is. I'd like to start by just kind of identifying where we are with this as Churchill, as the community who responds. One of the things that I was adamant about at the point that we decided, or that you decided as Woodland Hills, that you weren't going to have an SRO in the building, was that there would be situations that now my officers are going to end up having to go to, where they're either coming in hot and don't have information, or they're making multiple trips to the school district. And so before, right, there's both the security part and there's the financial part. And understand, make no mistake, that the SRO, part of the removal of the SRO was a financial decision, and then we discussed that. That was an open discussion, so it's not something that should be a secret. So that being the case, one of the things I had said back then was if we find ourselves in a position where we are having kind of regular calls of our police going over there, it's going to become a problem. Now, in this situation, there's the safety problem first, because the security of the kids is primary. So let's not confuse this, right? But then there's also this space of how many calls are we going to anticipate for the school year, right? Where my officers are heading over to the school again. That's part of how we ended up in the SRO in the first place. Now, back then when we were told of the removal of the SRO, this type of scenario I was told wasn't going to happen, right? We weren't going to have multiple times where the officers would have to go over there. I had that direct conversation with the superintendent at that time. And so now I'm sitting with my counsel and I'm saying, okay, I need to hear the plan that makes sure that we're not in some scenario where there's kind of regular kind of officer trips to the school district, both for the kids, because I just don't want to see them at threat on a regular basis, but also for the borough, so that we have a clear understanding of what the relationship is and what the role of our officer are to a building. From my vantage point as counsel, I say to myself, and I've said this to you also, there's nothing I'm going to say that should be shocking, and this is just my position. I haven't discussed with the rest of council. If this was a business and we were getting, 4 calls this month, and then we ended up with 4 calls next month and 5 calls a month after that, right? That would be a problem for us that we'd have to address to a nuisance space. Now, you're not a business in the typical sense, right? You're a school district and you're trying to educate the kids. So I get that, but we're still faced with the reality of we need to understand, right, how we're going to prevent these kind of moments, both in the sense of the security of our children and in the sense of my officers having to head over there on a regular basis. So I kind of lead that to ask kind of what is the future plan, right, to address these kind of moments and other moments, and what's the line of communication, right, to ensure that we have full understanding.
Well, if you don't know me, I'm James Harris. I'm the superintendent. And I can tell you from last Wednesday, we've taken a different approach or a stance against the students who decided to disrupt everything in Woodland Hills for the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Those students who were involved with the fight, no matter to what degree, have been suspended. We are looking at, if not already, placed them in alternative placements outside of our building. We've also cited them. So we are pressing charges against those students for various degrees. Mr. Petrogallo, I know, has been working with the Churchill Police and making sure that we get it right. But that's a different approach than we have taken over the last few years. We are not tolerating this type of behavior at all. Zero. There were a number of football players on the team who decided to fight. As Mike said, they've been removed from the team permanently for the end of this year. It's too bad for them. They're seniors. We made the playoffs. They're done. I've been getting calls all week from parents and students begging for a second chance, and we're not giving it. So we're taking a much harder approach this time than we have in the past by giving second and third chances. Principal Mans is on this call also. She's the new interim principal replacing Dr. Woods. Many of you have not met her. Her, along with her new revamped administrative team, we've added a dean, an assistant director of people personnel, and we will be adding a dedicated security person. The job posting just came down for the high school. Hopefully Mike has created a good relationship with Chief Ackerley, who I've never met. I've spoken to him. I know he's out, but Officer Plines has been fantastic, and I've known him for a few years, but we are taking a much harder approach to these students, and they have been removed for a minimum of 45 days. With the students who've been calling in pranks, threats, as Mike said, we are working with law enforcement to track down their phone numbers, and we'll press charges against them too. We have no tolerance for this type of disruption. We have a lot of good students in our building, and this last 2 weeks, 32, 35 students have made it really bad for 1,200. We have a new safety plan that's available with a summary Mike developed with Principal Manns. You all are welcome to see it. It goes step by step on what is happening in the morning through transitions and at dismissal. We will be pretty much in a soft lockdown until Principal Manns feels that the building is operating in a way that she feels fit. A soft lockdown is basically when after the bell rings, students go into their classrooms and the teachers lock their doors. Anyone left in the hallway will be removed for a day, suspended. Generally, this fixes the problem in about 2 days. Once students go home, we're no longer doing internal suspensions, they go home. We will have hallway sweeps, bathroom sweeps. One of the things that we would like to do, but we can't do, is remove cell phones. These students are planning things through various social media sites, planning to meet each other up and meet in the bathroom and fight or do whatever. So we now have security outside of the bathrooms. We have cameras in every space except classrooms and restrooms. However, we have a dedicated person now sitting in front, monitoring the cameras and recording events as they occur. We are, like I said, we're adding another security director on site for the high school in particular. And we have, through Pal American, some of their better employees who work with the students to deal with those issues in the building. And Mike is camped out there also. And a lot of my senior staff is in and out of that building every day now.
So I'll tell you something that concerns me again, kind of in this space. And this has been part of the challenge, I think, really, and part of the challenge even in these moments. So you just said you have a new security plan, correct?
No, we always had an evacuation safety plan. We always had that where the students go in case there's a shooting or a large fire where they have to evacuate the building. This is a plan for when they come into the building, to step-by-step guide for Pal American, who really, since we were closed last year or not open to students, really didn't get their feet wet in working with the students and developing that plan. We had, who was the other company we had? I forget the company.
So can you clarify real quick that the purpose of that plan is what? I'm confused. You said it's not a security plan. What kind of plan is it?
Well, no, there's two. We have a security plan where if something happens in the building, we need to go on lockdown and we have to do our, what Alice is, hide in place, flee.
Sure.
We've always had that plan in place.
Right.
This is a step-by-step guide directing our internal security folks on what to do in every situation that we could think of. When students are getting off the bus, as they enter the building, how they're checked, how they transition between classes, for teachers, how to give out passes and restroom and hallway usages, and then at dismissal, what the process.
And so I guess what I'm trying to sort a little bit as we kind of discuss this, I don't think our department was aware of that or notified of that, right? So if, and maybe it's something you feel that the police don't need to, like, help me understand why it seems that it's something that we don't know, right? And we're the ones who end up having to come into the building in these moments. So it would be helpful. So was it discussed with our chief? Was it like just help me understand?
Yeah, sir, if you don't mind, can I take that one?
Hold on. Are you asking how students transition classes?
Said that your internal security has a plan for when people are showing up, right? Like how they're getting off the bus, right? And we're getting called in because there's a potential situation. We don't know the process in which kids are in the hall, whether they're supposed to be in the hall. We don't know what the process is, right? Because it's not being communicated to our department, or is it?
May I take that one, sir?
Go ahead.
All right. So basically, like to use an old phrase, the ink is still wet on this. This was something, as Mr. Harris said, we had our emergency action plan that was on the books since long before I got here. What we just did as of 5 p.m. this afternoon is, and I made this analogy earlier, and I don't recall to whom, but let's say this is the old days and there's no internet, and we've got the old white pages, right? That's the comprehensive, emergency action plan. What we did here was we took the bullet item, no pun intended. we took the need to know items for immediate action, and we formulated that into a logical flow of everything from student arrival to an incident occurs, the notification protocols. And as I, in those last two narratives that I shared, unless, and we're all about corroboration here. If there's a faster, better way, then, and I still believe, the 911 call needs to go out for recording purposes. But since we have a good rapport and a close working relationship with the chief, and in this case, Officer Plines is the acting, an immediate call from me when I'm notified, he's notified next. And we'll be more than happy to share. As I said, this plan was as of maybe 5:02 p.m. this afternoon, but absolutely get it distributed so that in any time of the evolution, your officers responding would know exactly, oh, we're soft lockdown. Well, what does that mean at the high school? Well, this is what it means. And hard lockdown and so forth, even up to and include when we dismiss. There are a couple options that Mrs. Manns and her staff put out that from a security perspective, I think they're fantastic. So, are we option one dismissal, option two dismissal? And your officers would have that knowledge as a quick reference as well.
And one of the things that this plan does is it educates everyone on it, not just security. So the teachers had a lot of input on this, and so did Principal Manns and her staff, because they're the ones who are directing the teachers when they have their prep periods, other period support periods, the folks in the building direct where security go, the hot spots. So the hot spots have been identified, which hallways where kids congregate pretty much, and where we need to move them along from the cafeteria back to their classrooms, or if they're leaving gym, things like that.
And if I could, I would like to also add, whenever we do periods of training, let's say, for example, on an in-service day or something like that, when we're going to train with the staff, absolutely would like to extend that invitation to any of the officers who would be able to attend. I think that would be a prudent way to go.
It also helps that the officers, know the teachers, know the front office staff, because it has changed over the last few years. And I don't think anyone on here would recognize Principal Manns, possibly, unless they popped into the school. So, or Mike after a few years, or myself. I've been here 4 years. Mike has been here, what, 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, Principal Manns 2, I believe. So we're all, new faces to a lot of folks. So it helps that when Officer Pline showed up, we're familiar with each other, good relationship. So it's.
Jay, could I have a question?
Please, Kevin.
Yeah. Mike and Mr. Harris. I want to be clear. There are 8 contract security officers at the high school.
Well, I'm sorry. Can you hear me, sir? Am I off mute?
Yes, I can hear.
All right. So the original plan for the start of the school year was to have 8 during the day. What we had done is, and one other thing too, in the interest of making sure we're all clear on this, to handle the influx of students in the morning, what I requested of our vendor and what they've agreed to provide, as you know, the intermediate school starts later than the high school does. So to bring the students in the morning without compromising the thoroughness of the search and the screening at the metal detectors, we have 7 officers who will be at the intermediate school for the day. They'll report to the high school as well. So that would give us 15 to 16 personnel for the morning arrival.
Okay.
All students that come through the doors in the morning come through metal detectors, their bags are checked, and it just like, I hate to make the comparison, but similar to an airport, should something set off an alarm, and these are all industry, these are state-of-the-art metal detectors and they're all new. That was one of my first tasks when I got here. So if you're familiar with these technology, they're by zone. So as you walk through, it'll actually indicate with not only an audible tone, but a light as far as where the perceived item is, high, medium, low. And then our tertiary, measure is a hand wand, and then we'll determine what the cause of it is, a cell phone, car keys, what have you. So once that's done, then the other 7 guards will go on to their jobs at Dixon Intermediate, and the 8 personnel that are tasked at the high school will stay there. Well, one of the things that we asked for now was additional personnel from our vendor. Now they've, as Mr. Harris said, one of the things, and I think this all comes from relationship building, I have a history with Pal American Security. They provided all the security officers when I was at the Allegheny Health Network prior to coming here. And that was 13 sites and roughly 250 personnel at any given time. So what they've allowed for me is I have some input in who they send to us and the training that we conduct with them once they arrive. And that's another thing too, you know, training for our security personnel has to be ongoing as well. But we've asked for additional personnel from them. The only thing they're facing right now, so it's a slower process than we would like, is they're competing against larger employer, you know, like right now with places like Target and some of the fast food chains offering, you know, competitive wages. They're up against that, but they've been doing a lot of hard work pushing people through, you know, the clearance process after we've identified them as likely candidates. So we're getting more people. That's a long answer for your short question, sir.
Okay, and now the reason our officers went, Officer Plains and Officer Sage, they went because there was a 9/11 call. Am I right in that understanding?
You're correct, sir. The first, now bear in mind though, the first 911 call came from me after I already informed him directly on cell phone so that it would be a matter of record. So, you know, they answered the call officially.
No, the first 911 call came from the teacher in the cafeteria.
Oh, yes, sir. That was on the 20th, correct. I was referring to the 27th, but that's
So
right.
it's automatic that if our police force gets a 9/11 call, they're on their way to the high school or to a school.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, were your contracted security, did they feel that they lost control? In other words,
No, sir. No, they did not. During the fight, as Mr. Harris reminded me, during the fight, it was a phone call made by a teacher at the inception of the fight. So essentially that fight went out most likely before the majority of the security team even arrived in the cafeteria. It was a fast call.
I'm just trying to determine, did your security force feel that they lost control?
No, sir.
Hold on.
I don't believe so.
I want to be honest right here. I've been here 4 years. We never had a fight like this. And I could tell you it took everybody was not expecting this type of fight. I'm going to be 100% honest. These boys, I mean, I know Mr. Dorn and I'm 6 foot, 185. These boys are bigger than me. This was a football team fight, a lot of the players, and about at least 10 players were fighting. So this was at a level that I've never experienced here. And I could tell you that we have had a pretty chill last few school years. And yeah, they've been, you know, brouhahas with a couple of kids fighting and things like that, but nothing to this level where we needed to bring people in from all security to jump in. I mean, we had a dean, pupil personnel, everybody jumped in to pull these young men apart. The girl fight, the girls were rough too. But these kids were going at each other. And we're seeing, along with other places, a heightened level of whatever after COVID. This is happening in a lot of other places here too. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of sadness. And I was at the school with Mike after the second or third fight, and there was just kids in the office crying because they're just so full of emotion. So I could tell you there wasn't a lot of, I mean, the boys fighting, yeah, they were trying to kick each other's butt. The girls fighting, same thing. But I can tell you that this level of aggression, that's why we're citing the students, we're removing them. And we took a time out for a couple of days because they were still so angry with each other. And it's hard to de-escalate that. So this level of fighting with students who are as big as we are, I mean, Mike's bigger than I am. And, you know, we were there and other folks were trying to hold these boys back. They would calm down. The moment you put hands on them, they would start to settle down a little bit, but we were not prepared. I don't think anyone is really prepared for that type of blow up. We're putting things in place now to help de-escalate that. And we're looking to place staff and community assistance, these violence interrupters that they call it, to help with these students deal with their feelings of coming back to school and being around each other. We're finding that these students may have been a couple years older, but their behavior and the way they're acting is back when they left school before COVID. So I'm not making excuses for these kids at all, because I did suspend them, did cite them, did remove them, but we're seeing, along with other places, that these students are having emotional outbursts that we need better experts in the schools, and that's what we're looking to get, and we're bringing some in to help de-escalate these students.
And I'm hopeful that there were no injuries to the students, or no serious injuries to the students or to your security or your teachers or our police force. Am I right in that understanding?
There was a student who was fighting, a boy was fighting. He suffered, I believe, a concussion, was taken off to the hospital. But as far as I'm aware, there were no teachers, no staff. Was any security injured in this? I'm not aware. I haven't heard anything from anyone. Assistant principal was running down the hallway. She twisted her ankle. She was wearing heels, twisted her ankle. Once again, they weren't dressed to break up a fight between 16 to 18-year-olds.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your efforts, and Chief, please thank the force for what they all did. So well done.
So I'd like to jump in here real quick. Thanks, Kevin. Sorry. You know, one of the things that I think was discussed here is probably, you know, some ongoing, you know, probably trauma that we've all suffered after 2 years of a global pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. You know, what's being done we've heard about the security side. How about mental health, counseling, that kind of stuff? I mean, de-escalation, is that something you guys are discussing? Is there a long-term plan or options that you're thinking about?
Yes, on both sides. We're offering teacher supports also, because teachers have gone through a lot also. So through our human resources department, we have our mental health folks who will be in the schools for I think today and yesterday or tomorrow, next few days. And they always have that available, but we'll have counselors on site for those folks. We're bringing in more community experts who do this work with young adolescents, with adolescents folks, to help get to the bottom of it. We're looking to hire someone as a security person who actually has connections in the community, who can talk to these students. One of the things that we've been doing, and we have stopped a few of these fights, is find out what's going on between neighborhoods. We're finding that there's some family beefs that are going on, and we've intervened before it's gotten into school, or we prevented it from going into school. And that's working. So some of these kids who were fighting, when I saw them, I said, "Why aren't you fighting?" They said, "We don't do that anymore." So we've been able to de-escalate them, get them to shake hands, and move past their neighborhood issues that are going on. There's still some underlying concerns that the community has, and the kids meet up in school. Because they know it's a safe place where they're not armed. They go through metal detectors, and they plan to fight sometimes at school. But we're trying to get ahead of that in a lot of times. So Mike's aware of a lot of these issues, and we meet with parents and grandparents in my building, in the admin building, and we try to mediate. And at the high school, they mediate with the students. And so far, it's been working. The issue that happened last Wednesday was the oldest one out there, boy meets girl, girl meets somebody else, and they don't like it. And that's where we are. But we are bringing in a lot of folks from the community who are experts in this field, licensed counselors, behavioralists, who can talk to these young people at their level and be able to get to the root of the problem. So for a lot of cases.
And if I can comment on that as well, Mr. Harris is speaking in the very immediate term. I can tell you that there are a number of my colleagues on the board who are looking for longer term solutions on this as well, including conversations about additional trauma services, things as comprehensive as the sanctuary model, which would be a real investment of time and resources and a commitment. We have not adopted any of those things, but those are all going to be in conversation in pretty heavy rotation over the next couple of months. And you know, a number of my colleagues are very well versed in these areas. At least one of them works in mental health, and several have other training as well. So I think there will be additional conversations about further supports and you know, a different approach that we might be able to take. Again, nothing is firmly in place at this point, but I think it's fair to say that this has brought to the fore conversations that we were already starting to have anyway and trying to have anyway for a number of years. But the immediacy of that need has made itself readily apparent.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Valerie, you said you had a question.
Hi, Valerie Reintaler. Are there any licensed counselors, mental health counselors on site right now at the high school?
Yes. Yes,
And are they there every day or are they there set days?
they're there every day.
Every day. And have they been made available for students and families and teachers too?
Yes, I could tell you Mike's a good old adage person. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So we have to make sure that there's counselors in that building and mental health professionals that the children, the students there see as someone that they would feel comfortable talking to. So we can roll out everyone who comes in there that could talk to these students, but sometimes these students don't feel comfortable talking to them. So we have to find people that the students feel comfortable with. And that's really what I would say to that. We have people available for them, and we're working with the University of Pitt. It's worked really well in our middle school grades to bring that program for restorative justice and de-escalation, and just having someone to talk to up there. There are folks in that building. They may not be a licensed behavioralist, but it's someone that the children feel safe talking to. And that's what they go to a lot more. They'll go to the dean. They'll go to the assistant director of people personnel. They'll go to Principal Vance and sit down. Whenever I go, they're always sitting in her office and they're just talking. That's what a lot of the students need, because they're going through various issues at home, community-wide, or with each other in the buildings.
To give a couple of specifics, we have 2 school social workers in the building. We also have contracts with Wesley Family Services to provide emotional support, and another, the name is escaping me, another school-based mental health provider that sees students by appointment. So those are some of the services that are in place in addition to the sort of bigger picture stuff that Mr. Harris was speaking about.
And Jamie, are those professionals only available to students with behavioral issues, or is that available to all students?
The social workers are available for all students. Anyone who would have a need would be there. The behavior, you are correct, the behavior, the behavior supports, the full-time emotional support, those kinds of things are in place for students who had been identified in that way. School-based mental health can be sort of an either or. They can self-identify and come in, make an appointment for those. Now, the school-based mental health folks are not there full-time, to my understanding. And I would be happy to be corrected on that by Principal Mans or Mr. Harris. But they are, available to make appointments for students who are in need, either self-identified or highlighted by staff.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from council members?
I have just a quick question, Adam McDowell, just to understand events a little bit better. The bigger fight that occurred on the first Wednesday, is that in any way a facilitating factor of the threats that were received later, or were those threats completely separate from the fight that occurred?
Well, sir, as near as I can tell, I think those fights at the high school on the 20th really didn't have anything, one man's opinion, again. My initial reaction when that safe to say something was received by us on the 27th, Wednesday, the 27th, first thought that crossed my mind, and bear in mind, we were still taking appropriate measures to respect the nature of the threat. First thought that crossed my mind was, okay, a week ago, after the fights, we had an anonymous threat, and then we shut down the school for 2 days. It's a week later, it's a Wednesday. I'm wondering if some youngster wants a long weekend. But, as I said, I'm speculation. But I will say this, I don't believe that Wednesday really had anything to do with the altercations the week before. It may have prompted some creative thought, but I don't believe that it stemmed from the violence.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
But I can't tell you, I mean, we're pretty sure, because Mike and I were together, those 911 calls that second Wednesday were because the kids wanted to get out. We heard them laughing, we heard them joking. It was fun for them after that. So the first fights, those 2 fights that same day weren't connected.
Mm-hmm.
There were fights later on that day that were connected to the boys fighting, because there were other boys jumping in. I'm sure you saw the videos, and they were all mad at each other. They were trying to get back at each other. So the young ladies fighting in the morning, then the boys fighting afternoon. The fights after the second fight were all tied to the boys fighting, because people took pot shots at each other. But the calls in that was on Instagram Live really was nothing we believe, to do with the fights earlier. But there was such a heightened sense of alertness that was going on when we got the call at, like you said, was it 5:20, 6:20, 6:20 in the morning? It was 6:20, 5:20. It was like 6:20. And we start bringing in kids at 6:45. So we figured we had 15 to 20 minutes to what to do. And some folks thought we should have turned the buses around, but that would have created havoc at home where all these buses are now bringing kids back home where who knows if parents were available or not. So we made the choice within a few minutes to bring them in and then do what we had to do.
So thank you. Any other comments from or questions from council? None. Mr. Mayor, Chief, any other comments? All righty. All right.
Can I add one last thing?
Yes.
Okay, I think this is important to put out for what it's worth. During that fight among the football players, and as Mr. Harris said, it was not small. One of the things, and never ceases to amaze me. One of the things that I noticed, and I think we all commented on, there were students, some of whom had previously been challenges for us, who actually went into the midst of the melee, separated fighters, grabbed them, picked them up, walked them out, and actually took an active role in diffusing the situation, kept going back in side by side with my security team and faculty. So, I think to that end, I wanted to mention that as well, just to let you know that I think the mindset of our students is there's a lot of positivity going on there as well. I wanted to share that for what it's worth.
I appreciate that. I hope that no child has to be in that situation, but I certainly appreciate it. And I also want to thank you all for coming out and speaking with us. It's important that we have the communication and understanding kind of what's going on. And this is part of that process. I hope that as we move forward, that we have more of this to ensure that we're able to be the best partners we can with you all and vice versa. Churchill, and Woodland Hills, this is our school district, right? We want success. I know that the school board and everyone is working extremely hard to try and find that route, and it's challenging. And so we just want you to know that we certainly are here trying to find the ways to support, but we also need to have the real conversations about what's going on. So thank you all again for your time. I think we're going to move on. I don't want to make you sit through all of our stuff. You have enough board meetings all your own, Jamie. I'm not going to do it to you. So.
Thank you, Mr. President. We appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you all. And as always, we are available.
One other issue. I told you, that's why I had to remind me. No, it's totally fine. One other issue, Jamie, before we jump off. So we received a request from the tax collector for reimbursement for a training in the sum of $500, I believe. To be quite frank, I think it's our position, and I'm going to jump in front of some of council because I haven't had full conversation, but I'm comfortable with this. So feel free to knock me down. The current situation of the tax collector was not one that we wanted, and one that was encouraged by the school district, in particular business manager. As a result, we look at the reimbursement, and it's not something that we feel that the borough, it's not very much, but it's not something we feel the borough is willing to pay. And so we're probably going to ask that you all are willing to pay the reimbursement for the tax collector that we now have, given that there was such a push from the school district for this particular tax collector versus our subcontract situation that we had before. So that's, I want to put that on your radar because that's where we stand with it. Again, it's not a major issue. It's not a large amount, but it's something that I think we had a long and direct conversation about this on multiple occasions, particularly with your business manager at that time. And so here we are. So that's the word. Let me know if it's going to be a problem. You can reach back to me. But I promised, I promised I would bring it up now. And so me and you can, if you need to talk to your board and let me know, and I'll give you the particulars on the reimbursement.
Yeah, if you would send me a request on that, I will put it before my board, check and see what our history has been, what precedent exists related to reimbursements of that kind, and we'll see what happens from there.
I totally understand, but I would be remiss if I did not bring it up before we left.
I
So
appreciate
again, thank you all. I really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll continue the dialogue.
Thank you. Appreciate
Have
it.
a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
So, we unfortunately are not going home quite yet, as we are still within the space of the workshop. That being the case, I think where we're pulling up to now is the question of any kind of updates, whether it's from the mayor. I know the report isn't really ready yet. Any issues that need to be brought up, I think we've covered within Hills. So I don't know if there's anything that needs to be discussed at this time. I turn it to all the faces. So one question though, Mr. Mayor, just really quick, and for Ron, a full breakout of what's happening at the school in terms of the calls for this month, just because of the specifics. Yeah. Anything else on the table for? Yep.
I'd just like to welcome our chief to the conversation. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for joining us this evening. We miss you, but we're all sending you good vibes. Okay.
I appreciate that, Diane. Thank you.
Thanks.
I've been bugging him through this whole meeting. Poor guy. That's all I do is bug you, man. That's the unfortunate nature of me. I'll work on the I'm gonna work on the warm and fuzzies. I don't have them yet, but I'm gonna find them. And yeah, Valerie and Diana are trying to get me to more empathy. Is what I'll say. More empathy.
You have a young daughter. You better get better at that.
Oh man, are you kidding me? Unfortunately, she's too much like me. There's no space for that. All right. So anything on discussion items before we kind of flip over? Any preliminary reports that need to be discussed? We've got
Ken has his hand up for the tree committee.
Ken.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Floor is yours. What you got for us today?
Okay, I have a couple items. I'm going to start from the toughest, but then end up with, I think, some pretty positive things that you'll find. I'll be brief because I know everybody's been, we're heading towards 8:30 here. On a challenging side, about a week ago, neighbors were calling me saying, hey, there's a tree company taking limbs off of pin oak trees along the street. And everybody knows that you don't do it until at least November 1st, but more because of the warm weather, most arborists are now saying after Thanksgiving. And so by the time I got to the site where it was happening, they were on the last tree. And this tree company, they didn't even know what oak wilt was. And I watched them at the very end of their job, incredibly dangerous, where they had ladders unsecured. It was just two young fellows. They were very nice, but they had no idea that they said, well, we're just taking dead limbs. And I said, yes, but you're making cuts back at the trunk and you're exposing for insects that come in. I said, you really should put shellac on them. So, but so anyhow, so a number of neighbors around me are very concerned that these folks, I guess the best way somebody's described to me is amateurs coming in and really not meeting probably the qualifications in our ordinance, because it's supposed to be a duly licensed and bonded tree service. It's to be doing a type of work. And I said, why are you cutting now the dead limbs? They said, because we can see them. Because during the winter time, we don't know which ones are live or not. Well, anybody in the tree business can tell a live limb and a dead limb, even when the tree is dormant. But I'm not asking for an answer here. But we have still a big education effort. I'll put an article in the next version of the newsletter. But my concern is having somebody come in and do work like that. It's not just a risk for the trees they do, but if those trees get oak wilt, then it goes through the roots, and then anybody lives near it, then they got to get their trees treated. So it's a situation. It's everything cutting down a tree, but it's somebody coming in and actually could do harm to the trees itself. But I'll work with Alex in the office, determine, in addition to putting the something in the newsletter, that whether it's worthwhile to have a letter to the homeowner that hired them, because to know that they got to be careful who they're having do the work, on these trees. And it's just not their trees, it's everybody in the community. Okay, the next ones I have are all positive. The next item is a complete opposite of what you just heard from the Woodland Hills School District. On the day after the last council meeting, we had a major tree planting effort at the high school on Tuesday, October 12th. Lasted all morning. 20 of the greatest students you'd ever want to meet. And the mayor was able to join us that morning as well too. And then a week later, actually on October 20th, we did a tree planting at Turtle Creek Elementary. Another very positive experience with the young children and the fourth graders that were there. What made these two tree plantings unique from the other one we did in the spring is that we were able to interact one-on-one with the students and the teachers who were there. And I think everybody there left with a positive impression of our tree committee efforts, and those of us who were able to be there, that we're really trying to support the school and the students. One of the fun things at the elementary school, Kathy Pearson is the teacher, the coordinator, and she's on the climate action committee for the school district. Kathy has the students writing a newspaper article. So the students interviewed Clara Katongo from Tree Pittsburgh about what she does, but then the students interviewed me about what does a tree committee do? What am I worried about? And it was just a tremendous opportunity to interact with these ones at the high school, and then a week later with these younger children in the fourth grade. And for me, it was a very special day. Ruth Ann was allowed to join me because our grandson was one of the students who was part of the tree planting at Turtle Creek. And all the children across the whole district here, they get pretty excited on that effort. So there'll be more efforts going forward, but we'll keep that going despite the other challenges you heard here. I think that interacting with the students in a positive way on something such as the tree planting or other related efforts is probably a good thing. The next item is Diane Law and Mayor Gamrat and I had a chance to meet with the leaders of the Allegheny Land Trust last Wednesday. I'll just speak from a tree aspect. Diane can probably add some additional things that go beyond the trees. But first of all, very welcoming group. They are so excited to be able to work with not just the council, but any representatives that can help them in making that Churchill Valley Greenaway a very special place. And one thing to clarify, they spent time explaining why it's not Churchill Valley Park. It is Churchill Valley Greenaway. The intent is to leave it as natural state as it can. They really don't want to be putting in tennis courts, or even though people would like to have some other sports activities or whatever, it's not that. It's really intended to be a space that nature takes care of its own. They will do things to preserve the meadows, but they definitely want to do some reforestation. I highly recommended to them that any tree planting that goes on should be done in coordination with either Woodland Hills School District, Penn Hills School District, even Wilkinsburg School District, that you should have the children, and if there's any other schools that are in the area, let the children be part of that effort. And they said that given our tree planting efforts are already underway, they were very pleased that we already have a relationship with the teachers, the students, and with the school board. They said that they would be willing to define an area that would be a Woodland Hills preservation area. In other words, or exploratory forest. So as the trees would get planted by the students, it would continue to be followed. It would be intended to be a long-term learning effort within that. So they're very interested in establishing a partnership in that way. And finally, I'll let Diane Law speak. They were very intrigued with the borough's willingness to let them also make use of the Bullock Pens Park area. So I spent time with them with maps showing where the property went. And I think they're pretty excited to be able to work with us in making that space really quite special. So, and then I'll make one more point and then I'll open it up. Last point is Alex reached out to me late last week that one of our young residents, Natalie Boydston, is interested in our tree committee work. So I spent time with Natalie on Friday, late Friday afternoon. Natalie sent me her biography over on yesterday, which I've since shared with those involved with the tree committee. We'd like to consider Natalie coming on as a member of the committee. She has her undergraduate degrees in wildlife work, but she has her master's degree in urban planning. And she did volunteer work with Tree Pittsburgh on tree planting. She's a member of the Audubon board. She brings all the right skills that would really complement everyone here. Diane Law wrote back to me this afternoon, and I'm willing to do this. I'll be willing to put a letter together recommending her to the council, asking for approval to bring her on. We have 3 members. We're allowed to go to 5. So she has a strong background in geographical information systems that would help us be able to better catalog where we have all our trees and what type of trees, and maybe be able to manage the overall effort so we could target particularly streets where we would give information and not worry about getting information to streets that don't have any street trees. So she could be a tremendous asset to our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate your comments as always. I think they're important, and the work you do is important. And so I appreciate the update of kind of where we are. I think this moves us into discussion on the 21 draft budget. So I will turn it to the people and see what we want to discuss, how this is going to flow.
I think the first thing is just the calendar. You want to get a look at that. Obviously, we'd like to, after next week's regular meeting, be able to advertise. The Finance Committee has been working with Krista to draft the budget, and they had another meeting today. And so the numbers you'll see below this calendar reflects that. So the key dates are advertising and, of course, adoption. Looking towards December 13th to do the adoption. And I'm just going to scroll down here. And so, Krista, you can jump in at any time, but basically what we have on the agenda, and this is online as well as printed out for a number of the council members, or if you have it in another file, the revenue and expenditures in a minute. And this is similar how the advertisement will run in the newspaper. So it gives you a little bit of detail. As the council knows, and Kevin can testify, there's a lot more lines and plenty more data to back it up. So Kevin or Krista, if you guys want to chime in, and I'll just slide the scroll down here as you want me to. Right now, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you can speak.
Okay, Krista, I'd like to have you follow up after I talk. If you see the second part of the agenda, there's some scenarios there, and the Finance Committee, Adam and Valerie and myself, along with Krista and Alex, we're recommending to the council that we approve a budget that brings in another police officer next year. I think that has to be vetted more as to when exactly we need it. But also, we're recommending that a small stipend be allowed to newly elected members of council for next year. It's very small, but other boroughs and other municipalities do that, and I think it's worthwhile. I think it could be somewhat of an incentive for people to run for office. I think in the past we've kind of had that problem. So that's my recommendation. Krista, if you could go into the part about the reserve fund, where we have a bank balance, and then we're going to apportion that bank balance at the end of each year to the capital reserve fund and to the operating fund. you could, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of just go big picture and then come in with this fund balance. So just for everyone watching from the public, big thing is that local governments, we can't take on debt like the federal government. So we have to be self-sufficient. A big thing that we haven't seen in prior budgets is that a beginning and ending fund balance. And when we talk fund balance, that's different than a bank account. So this is a fund is how we operate on paper, and account is where the money is actually held. So this year with this budget, a big thing is that you will see a beginning and ending balance. And why that's important is because during the months of January to March, we don't really get much real estate income, if anything. In January, we get a little bit from like just the end of the year, everyone paying their taxes before they become delinquent. But really until your borough taxes come out in March, we don't get much income flowing through, but there's still bills that need to be paid. And real estate taxes are our major source of income, and encapsulates about 60% of our income, which is a large amount. So that fund balance really kind of helps us float through those first couple months of the year while we're still trying to stay afloat without taking on something called a tax anticipation note. It's essentially, think of it in the world of like payday loans. You take out money short term and you pay interest on it just to get by. We don't want to do that. That's not sustainable, and it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. So this fund balance policy that's being suggested is incorporated in this budget. And what that does is it suggests at the end of each year that we have at least 15 to 18% of our annual expenditures reserved at the end of the year. That means that we're in a good place. We can get through to the next year. And then if we have anything over and above 18%, which would be ideal, right? Like if we're fiscally responsible, we are able to maintain our budget, and there are of course no unanticipated emergencies, then that anything above, we have over 20%, that would go into divided into an operating reserve fund and a capital reserve fund. And why these are important is when I talked about earlier, we can't take on debt. That operating reserve fund is like our savings account, right? Where we can dig into it so that we don't have to, in case a stormwater line breaks and we need to repair it, we take from the operating reserve fund with intentions to pay it back and bring it back up to a reasonable percentage that we see would be about 20% of our annual expenditures. The other amount would go into our capital reserve fund, and that would allow us to make bigger purchases over the long run, i.e. capital expenditures, and allow us to do so without taking on debt. And, that it would be in the form of like a long-term, essentially like a long-term loan. So that's what we as a borough have done that very well for a very long time. But the goal is to, with this fund balance policy, is to not put that onus on future taxpayers. And, when we're using money now, to be able to use the money that we have now, kind of as pay as you go or pay as you use sort of scenario. So that's kind of the big thing with the fund balance policy, is creating more of that long-term financial planning. The other thing too is that you'll see with the suggested budgets here that that the option that Kevin suggested to you is above 15%, and that keeps us in a good range, and that wouldn't draw from an operating reserve fund, nor would it spur a tax millage increase. So we are in a good place. The thing about that policy that's in your binders, though, is that it's not been put into a resolution. So that is something that we would suggest, is that we just solidify that so it is in writing. So that is, held to in future administrations and future council bodies as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I know that's a lot. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
No, but this budget, there's no millage increase, and there's also no increase to the sewer budget in terms of the surcharge. So staying even. Thank you, Krista.
Questions, comments, people, before I jump into my own space? So man, if
But
Matt,
the
you have
idea is
a comment?
next Monday, we want to vote on
Making
this
sure.
to be advertised. So.
So, couple points kind of right away. First of all, having kind of reviewed it a few times, you've done a wonderful job. I could commend the committee as a whole, and Krista and Alex. Krista, I know you've been kind of hammering away at this and getting us to where we are. And holding the line, Kevin, I know was really important. That we're able to do so on both the millage and on the fee is incredibly impressive. You know, for years, people don't, may not realize that the borough had taken out a TAN loan, a tax anticipation, for years and years and years. And, the new kind of our new management and administration looking at this and saying, wait a second, why are we doing that? There's a better way. Kind of tells me the way that we look at things, right? That there's a better way, and we continue to find it. So I super appreciate it. I want to have the conversation right now kind of briefly, because one of the things that you had mentioned, Kevin, was the compensation of elected officials. And so I just want to kind of run through this really quick, because effectively here in Churchill, there is essentially the ability for borough councils to receive a stipend of up to like $1,875, I think, on an annual basis, like total amount. Not very much, but it's something that historically council members haven't taken. One of the things, though, I think, as we've kind of looked to the future of Churchill, especially for kind of not so much for me or for Diana, or Kevin, but I think as we look at kind of moving forward kind of for Churchill, the role of council has become quite intense, and it's not going to stop anytime in the near future, I don't think. And so, I think to ask our fellow council people, the work that they're doing, that they get some minor stipend that's afforded to them by code, I don't think is unreasonable. And I say this, I've been on council for, I think, 11 years now. So I don't really have a vested self-interest in that. I don't think that's the point of this. But I do think that, Kevin, you're right in kind of trying to attract folks and trying to get people to continue to do this kind of work. Sometimes having kind of a small kind of stipend may be helpful. It may allow people to justify to their spouses why they're gone as much as they are. It ain't gonna do that much for a lot of us. I get it. And it ain't, it turns out to about less than minimum wage a lot of the time. But nonetheless, so I would support it. I understand that the kind of point of it. And it's something that I know several council members have come to me and discussed with me about it. So I don't have personally, I don't have an issue with it. So that's my 2 cents, outside of just commending folks in the wonderful job that they've all done. Any other discussion on this? I'm going to be quiet and turn it to you.
Yeah, I don't remember too many times when I've disagreed with our fearless leader, but I think I do on this one. I think that the tradition in Churchill of serving on the council, without any kind of payment, is something that in part makes Churchill one of the special places that we are. I can't imagine anybody being attracted to running for office because they're going to get $1,800. I would rather work on, a better defined policy of reimbursable expenses. I think that for many of us, attending conferences that are far away, driving our own cars back and forth, that sort of thing. I know some of that is available, and it's, like when I go to particular meetings representing the council and so on, but I really think that if we got more specific about expenses that council members incur and what they should be applying for in terms of reimbursement, I would feel much better about that.
It is rare that we disagree, isn't it? And to be clear, you know, it is not something that I necessarily is. Again, I have gone over a decade. It is not an issue that I am championing for myself. Just to kind of to put that out there. But I can recognize it. I can also say that I don't know that all of our future council people will be exactly in the same positions that we are in. And so as a matter of codifying it, it seems like that may be the thing to do. I recognize your point too. I think that, you know, there's a challenge here, you know, particularly I think when me and you are talking about it in having, you know, some of the senior kind of council folks, that we're used to, you know, the way that it's been kind of feeling. You know, and I am too. Like, listen, I've been on this seat for, you know, since a long time now, sadly. But anyway, but I also think that the change doesn't necessarily change the tradition of who we are. I think we can have this kind of change and still maintain the kind of folks that we want to have. You know, any disapproval by Diane is so hard for me. Like, it's oh, you're breaking my heart. So that's all I'm gonna say. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments.
Jay, I'd like to add, Jay, this would only be applied to people who are elected this year going into next year. People that are midterm would not receive this, and that's by code. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. So
yeah, and that's my point again. It doesn't pertain to me. But I can recognize it as something that you know, may be helpful for some folks.
thanks, Diane, for your comment. I appreciate it too. So
Kills me every time Diane she just does like, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's throwing the dagger at me. Okay. So I think we're generally good on the timeline. If people have questions on the timeline itself, on moving it next month, are we good? Yeah. Anything else, Alex, on your end? Because I'm not going to move forward without getting that point.
Yeah, because really we have, you've covered number 6, so 5 and 6 have been covered. 7 is just something that we've already started to talk about in committee.
Okay.
So I don't know if Matt or others, but that's where it's at. I just wanted everyone to hear this and maybe know what we're thinking. And I'll do a share screen real quick here for the audience at home who maybe haven't had an opportunity to download the agenda. But there's a thought of taking advantage of state statutes to create a general purpose authority for the creating and administering of a stormwater sewer fee. And it's just something to think about. It's not imminent, but we definitely knowing, we've certainly heard a lot about the concerns of stormwater, and in 2019, particularly, there was significant rainfall events that we needed to deal with, and a number of projects have been identified from that. So we're going to be looking at addressing that. So something to think about in the future. We wanted the public to hear about it and know that different committees will be working on it.
And that sits in your committee now?
Yeah, so that's with the infrastructure committee now. You know, just as a quick summary, I guess the idea being that you know, sometimes it can make sense to look at you know, impervious surfaces, et cetera, to make sure that the you know, the right proportion of the bills for stormwater runoff are going to the right places. You know, for example, if a large shopping mall opens, you know, in another borough, that might create a bunch of stormwater runoff. Well, if everyone's sharing in that equally, does that make sense? So we're in very initial stages. You know, the infrastructure committee is going to work with Gateway engineers to hear a little bit more about this, review some sample ordinances that have been done by other boroughs, and really start the information process, the education process. And then as we work through that, we will inform the rest of council and probably have a joint meeting or have, if it's something we're going to look into studying further, our engineer, kind of do a presentation at one of our workshop meetings in the future.
Excellent.
In the binder, there's more information that Gavin has provided as well as Dennis.
Outstanding. All right. Well, I appreciate that it's in good hands. And
So yeah, if there's any
Just
questions, feel free, or if anyone has public comments or other things, my contact information's on the borough website, and happy to hear and discuss.
excellent. All right. Moving us into any other particular issues that people want to bring up. Anything new? Business insurance, it's okay.
I'll just I'll keep talking for a second here. I didn't say it under the budget discussion, but I came in, was just on the board for doing the budget last year, and certainly appreciate the staff's hard work. I think we say it all the time, but just to reiterate, it's been very clear. We've gotten a lot of great information, and I know part of that has been updating and kind of modernizing some of our accounts and how we're tracking things. So we certainly appreciate that effort, and it's made our lives very easy. So thank you and excellent work.
Excellent. All right. Anything else? All right. Hearing nothing else. Since we did a call to order, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, anyone?
Second.
All right. Game, set, match. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dennis, for hanging out and having nothing to say. It's a great space to be in. Felipe's growing his beard too. Just a side note, so that you know. And enjoy, Kevin, your time. And we're all out of here. And Gavin,
Good night, all.
how's that table treating you?
Good night.
All right.
I'll see y'all.